everyone, and welcome to my channel, Just Another Struggling Writer, the beleaguered author's one-stop shop for commiseration and, hopefully, inspiration. My name is Kerry and I am just another struggling writer. This is my first video, so of course an introduction is in order. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kerry. I'm a 35-year-old mom of 3. I live in the southern part of the United States with my kids, my partner, our 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 2, possibly soon to be 3, pet mice. So just going off the name, you might be thinking that this is just going to be a writing related channel, but that is actually not the case. I do plan on doing some BookTube related content as well, including reading vlogs and book hauls and even some book reviews. You might also see me posting just some slice of life content as well, just showing my life of being a parent and being a person with a full-time job while also trying to write and doing a lot of reading, and just sort of how my life all fits together. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But for now, I'm just going to start off simple. I thought the best way to show you guys my personality and kind of what you can expect from this channel going forward would be to do both the AuthorTube and the BookTube Newbie tags for you. So without further ado, let's get right into it with the author tag. Is this a trick question? This feels like a trick question. I just went to YouTube and typed in the search bar writers and fantasy writers and writing advice and tips on writing, and I just kind of explored from there and just found some creators that I liked, and that was really about it. So my main genre and my passion is in adult fantasy. There isn't really a specific subgenre that I prefer. I've dabbled in urban fantasy and epic fantasy and romantasy, and I really just love exploring all aspects of the fantasy genre. Usually in my stories you can find themes of political intrigue and found family and adventure, but those are the sort of things that I like to write the most. It's also the same things I like to read, but we'll get to that later. Additionally, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to write romance novellas for Scribd, which is a subscription service, and it was a really fascinating, really instructive experience for me. Because I had written so much in the fantasy genre and didn't have much experience writing romance at all except for in fan fiction, I really had to adapt my writing style, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But I had to kind of change my process and change the way I preferred to write and kind of adapt my voice for this different genre. I also got to learn how to write on a deadline and work with editors, and I really appreciate that opportunity because I feel like I learned so much about not just the craft of writing, but about myself as a writer. With that all being said, though, I haven't worked with them in about 8-9 months now because I just burned myself out on it. I loved doing it. I loved being able to say that I was a professional writer. But the deadlines were just so tight, usually 4 or 5 weeks for 35,000 words to write and kind of do a mini edit yourself. And it was just so much work. And of course I have my family and I have a full-time job, and I was really just burning myself at both ends just to do it. So I ended up backing out. I still hope to get back to it one day when I have, you know, a few more spoons in my drawer, but it was really instructive, and I feel like I grew so much as a writer in the 18 months that I was working with them. Okay, so I actually prefer to write in present third person present tense. This is what got me into trouble a little bit with writing romance, is because they told me, like, no, don't do that, write in third past. But I just love the added tension, the added immediacy, the added urgency that present tense brings. I'm not so much a fan of first person present. It's just a little bit harder for me to digest as a reader, but for me as a writer, I really love third person present. I got started doing it several years ago, maybe 10-15 years ago, doing online role play, and that was the tense that I was primarily exposed to and primarily writing in, and I really just developed a taste for it, really developed a knack for it, and now I can't imagine writing my stories in any other way. So I'm actually a plotter, very much so, and that doesn't just go for writing. That is actually pretty much goes for every aspect of my life. I am an anxious person by nature, and I have a physical planner that I use every morning to kind of chart out how my day is going to be, and I like knowing in advance what my plans are going to be. And when it comes to writing, when it comes to starting a manuscript, I can't even put down the first word until I know what the ending of that story is going to be. And I know pantsers and discovery writers think that takes away some of the magic of writing the story if you just already know how it's going to end. But for me, my anxiety is based a lot around time. I view time as a currency, and you have to spend it just as wisely as you would money. And I have such a difficult time starting a project without having a firm grasp of the steps I'm going to take to reach the end. I can't possibly imagine going into a project and just wandering around in the woods, not knowing where it's going to go, and then just finding yourself at the ending. No, that is not me at all. I have to know where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. The way I always describe it is it's like planning a road trip, and you know you're going to start at point A, and you know you're going to start at point B, end at point B, but the middle is a little bit murkier. Sure, you have some beats and some stops you want to hit along the way, but you're also leaving room for adventure. You might be halfway along and think, oh, there's a great stop over there that we should stop at and take pictures and kind of explore. And for me, writing is the same way. I might be going along and hitting my outline all along the way, but if I get an idea or if I get inspired, I am going to veer off and explore that other path. The great thing is about being a plotter is that because I have my outline, because I know in advance what I'm going to do, I know how to get back on track. I'm never going to get stuck in the weeds like I imagine that plotters sometimes do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I always can find my way back to that roadmap so I can get to the ending. And for me, that really alleviates my anxiety. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time, and I'm also leaving myself room, relieving myself flexibility. So given my druthers, I am actually a person who prefers to write longhand, by hand, in a notebook with a pen. Yes, I know that's crazy, but I even used to do drafting that way, writing hundreds of thousands of words by hand. And the reason for that is several years ago, when I just started doing Nano, I had gotten about 5,000 words into the project, and I came home and I was about to start writing, and I was just stuck. And it wasn't that I had writer's block necessarily. I just felt so paralyzed by the blinking cursor and the blank page that I just couldn't look at it anymore, and I just closed my laptop and I just abandoned it for the day. But the next day while I was at work, I was, at my desk, and I thought of the next line in the story, and I just wrote it down in my planner. And then I wrote the next line and the next line, and then I got some ideas and I jotted them down at the bottom. So when I got home, instead of opening up my laptop, what I did was I just got a notebook and I just wrote everything down, and I just kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing until I had pages and pages and pages, and my pens were going dry, because it was just inspiring for me. And I'm not really sure why, but it was just so helpful for me to just look at a blank notebook page with a pen and just write it all out. The other thing I found with writing longhand is it really helps silence my inner editor. I have found that when I'm writing on a computer, I can just get hung up on a sentence and say, that's not right. And I refuse to move on until it's right. And then it just doesn't become about being right. It becomes about being perfect. When I'm writing longhand, I have found that I can kind of curb that impulse a little bit, because once the sentence is written, it's on the page. You can't backspace, you can't delete. I mean, you can scratch it out, but who has time for that, and it looks really ugly on the page, to be honest. So I just kind of star it and move on. And I wish I could apply myself in that way better when I'm writing on the computer, but that to me is why I love writing longhand so much. Is it just really helps me get back into a flow. That being said, lately I have had to come to the point where I just can't do it anymore. I just don't have the time. It does take like 3 times as long as writing, you know, on a computer, and it really cramps my hand, and I'm always having to buy notebooks, and I'm always having to buy pens because I like writing in the like sparkly gel pens that you get in high school, and then changing them. And anyway, and they only last for a couple of pages, but it's really fun to like flip through the books and like see all the colors. Anyway, I just don't have time. I just don't have time. If I'm ever going to get anywhere, you know, it would take me 30 minutes to write 600 words, just because, you know, that's, you know, I would have to stop every couple of paragraphs and rest my cramping hand. But so I've recently switched to going back to the computer. I'm kind of easing myself back into it. I'm using Dabble, which is a cloud-based word processor, and it has a lot of features that I really love from Scrivener, which I also have. But the cloud-based functionality means that I can write on my lunch break at work, write during my daughter's music lessons on my phone, and just pretty much anywhere I am, I always have it right there with me. And so that's what I use. That's how I prefer. That's what I'm doing now, even though it's not my preferred. Sometimes you just gotta say, hey, you gotta adapt and change with the times, baby. So I am actually planning on going the traditional route, and the reason for that is I know that in my heart of hearts, I just don't have what it takes to be an independently published author. I just don't have the energy to go out and find indie editors and cover artists and formatting and marketing. I just don't have it in me to do all of that. I barely have enough energy as it is to just write the damn manuscript. So I decided early on that I'm just going to go the traditional route, and I know it's harder to break in that way, you know, having to query and then go to, you know, on sub and all of that. But I just feel for me that is the right decision. But like I said, I have all the respect in the world for indie authors. So I have to say, I think I was probably about 10 or 11 when I started, like when I wrote my first story that I remember, like that wasn't just for school. And it was around the same time that I got into the Boy Wizard book series that shall not be named. And my story that I wrote was kind of basically a knockoff of it. And it was actually kind of dark, but kind of in the same vein and the same theme of a magic wizard school and a elder evil kind of haunting everything. But so that's where I would say about 10 or 11. And shortly after that, I got into more like fan fiction, and got away from original fiction so much. And I did all that throughout my teenage years and early 20s. And I was about 24 or 25 when I was like, oh, damn, I better get back into original fiction, because I basically forgot how to write original fiction. I was relying so much on characters and settings that had already been established that, you know, I had to really work at it to get back into writing original fiction and coming up with my own plots and coming up with my own characters. So I will say my biggest inspiration as a writer would be that author who wrote the Boy Wizard book series that shall not be named. As I said, I was, 11 years old, I think, when I first started reading it. The third book had just come out. And up until that point, I never really imagined myself as a writer. But after reading those books, I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. I have loved writing ever since then. Something about that series just really tapped into the creative part of my brain and really brought out that side of me. I will also say that because of that, my writing style is probably pretty similar to hers. I have tried to take some of the criticisms I have seen of her writing style and apply it to my own practice so that I'm not, making those same mistakes and falling into those pits as well. As much as it pains me to say it, the one thing I know for certain I cannot write is science fiction, and that is just because I just don't feel like I am smart enough to write sci-fi. I love it as a genre, but I don't think I am capable of it. With fantasy, it's pretty much up to each individual author, how to establish their magic and establish their world. With sci-fi, I feel like there's a little bit more reliance on actual science, and I am just not smart enough to kind of take real world concepts and expound upon them. I am much more of a person who likes to start from my own idea and go out from there, like with magic and with characters like that. So I love sci-fi. I just know that I would never be able to write it. So things you can look forward to on my channel as far as writing goes, I'll probably do some writing sprints and just kind of share my thoughts on the writing process and being like I said, a full-time mom, a person with a full-time job, and trying to fit in writing into all of that, as well as just kind of some vlogging of my writing process. I just hit about 10,000 words on my current work in progress, which is a portal fantasy that I was really inspired by the kind of dearth of fae romances in the fantasy genre right now, and this is just sort of my take on it, trying to improve on it and make something different. It's not strictly a romance. It started out that way, but I've kind of leaned against I've kind of gotten away from that, and now it's more like a portal fantasy with romance, and the fae are not like the fae of the most popular books in the kind of subgenre right now. No, not like Sarah J. Maas's fae at all. More like nature-based things like that. They're not really even elves, or not elves, fairies. So but that's kind of what I'm working on right now, just kind of my take on the fae romance portal fantasy sort of genre. And I hope that you will join me on this journey. So that is it for the AuthorTube Newbie tag. Next up, we'll get into the BookTube Newbie tag. Duh, because I want to be famous. Okay, just kidding. I actually sort of hate attention, but actually the reason I started this channel was the same reason most people start a BookTube channel, is I just want to talk about books, and I want to make friends, and I want to tap into the community and just have fun and expand my horizons as a reader. And I feel like the best way to do that is with a public accountability. And so that's pretty much why I'm here. So this might be tacky to say, but I actually don't know that I have anything new or unique to bring to the community. The BookTube community is pretty saturated already, and I really just started this channel just to have fun and just to talk about books and, you know, make new friends. I don't really have an agenda other than that, and I don't know that anything I say will be particularly new or insightful, but I just hope to make friends along the way, and if you're one of them, that's great, and if not, that's great too. I mean, I hate to keep repeating myself, but really the thing I'm most excited about is just meeting new people and making new friends and expanding my horizons as a reader and just joining the community and talking about books with people. I don't really have a lot of friends in real life who read the same things that I do, and so this is just a way for me to, you know, just kind of reach out and make connections with people, and I'm really excited about that. So I started reading probably around the same age that most American kids do, around 5 or 6. I really established myself as a reader probably in the 1st or 2nd grade, probably the 1st grade. I had already kind of established myself as the big reader of the family. And yeah, so 5, 6, 1st grade, thereabouts. So I actually have 2 answers to this. The first part being what book or book series got me into reading in general, and that would be the Little House on the Prairie series. I started reading this in, I think, the 2nd grade. I read The Little House on the Prairie first, and then I found out that it was a whole series, so I went back and found the first one, and then borrowed, I think the first 5 from the library, and then my family saw how much I loved them and then bought me this series. This isn't my original set, but this is the set that I had. And yeah, I just really loved it. My whole family on my dad's side are like history majors and real big history buffs, and so I really loved the historical setting and the protagonist, and I was obsessed with these books for so long, and they really nurtured my love of reading. On the other hand, the book that got me into fantasy specifically as a genre was Ella Enchanted. If you've read this book, you know how wonderful a story this is. And I remember reading this at, I think, like 10 or 11. And even at that age, I remember thinking it was such a shame that this book was so short, because there is such wonderful world building in it, such deep lore. You know, she's created custom languages and custom lore and all kinds of things for this book, which is a Cinderella retelling, and that's about it. It's only about 200 pages, but this is so rich in setting that I remember thinking, even as an 11-year-old, that I wish that this was longer, and I wish that there was more, because the setting was just so wonderful to me. And I credit this book specifically for nurturing my love of fantasy at such a young age, and I've never looked back since then. And I'm happy to say this is actually my original copy that I originally got when I was a kid. That my grandmother bought me at a library sale, and that says June 1998. So yes, so I have kept this with me throughout the years. It is one of my most favorite books of all time. I recently introduced it to my 10-year-old daughter, and she loved it as well. And this is such a special book. And if you haven't read it, even if you're not a fan of middle grade or fairy tale retellings, you have to read this book. It is excellent. Oh, I have so many favorites. Reads with Rachel is the one who kind of got me started on this path and being interested in content creation, inspiring me to start a book review podcast earlier this year, Phoenix Feather Fantasy Book Reviews, if you're interested. And My Name is Marines is probably the booktuber whose taste most aligns with mine, so I really trust her opinions and I really like her critiques on books. Reads with Cindy is just hilarious. I love watching her content. Her sense of humor is exactly like mine, so I really love watching her videos. And Sarah without an H, even though she and I don't really have similar book tastes, I really just love her personality and I love the content she puts out. And I think she's just really fun, and I would love to hang out with her in person. So there's so many great content creators here, but those are the first ones that come to mind. So as I mentioned in the AuthorTube tag, fantasy is my preferred genre both to read and write. I am not super specific about any subgenres. I like all corners of the fantasy, umbrella. I will say that I prefer adult. I'm not a super huge fan of YA as an age category. It's just my opinion. It's a whole thing. I can go into it in another video if you want, but I just prefer adult stories. I also have started to get a little bit into horror. I read House of Hollow earlier this year and really enjoyed it, and I've heard a lot of synopses for horror books that I've really enjoyed. And then I picked up Year of the Witching. It's over here somewhere. Yes, Year of the Witching. I'm really excited to read this one. I've heard it marketed as both horror and fantasy, so we'll see. But yeah, so mostly fantasy, but I'm also really interested in horror. I like science fiction, and pretty much anything with speculative elements is right up my alley. So I'm probably going to commit a booktuber sin here and admit that my book collection is actually not that robust. I am a person who has lived at or close to the poverty line pretty much my entire life, including as an adult, and I really had to pick and choose what books to add to my collection, and the ones that I did were mostly on my Kindle. So my book library is not super extensive. I think I have about 125 books, and most of those are on my Kindle. I do have probably maybe 30 books here in my home, and then maybe 20 in my Audible library, and everything else is on my Kindle. So this might actually come as a bit of a surprise considering how much I've been expounding on fantasy, but my favorite book of all time is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I love that book so much. I read it at least once a year, more like every 6 months or so. I just pick it up and just flip through it in a couple of days. I just love it. It's just such a comfort read for me. Even though there's nothing really new to explore there, I just love starting at the beginning of that path and just going through all the twists and turns of the story. I just love it so much. It's such a warm, it just makes me feel warm inside. I don't know what it is about it. I just love it so much. Other favorites is, again, as we talked about, Ella Enchanted. Absolutely wonderful book. I still think about the world building and just how much it inspired me to really get into fantasy specifically. And as for a more recent release, the book Red Sister by Mark Lawrence is a book that affected me so profoundly I couldn't even review it on my blog at the time. I just couldn't find the words to express what that book meant to me. Nana's journey just really touched me in ways I didn't expect. Of course, it was a fantasy story and it had all of these great fantasy elements, but for some reason I just loved everything about that story and about Nana and about her journey and about her growth and everything that went along with it. It just so profoundly touched me in ways that I can't really describe. There are lines in that book that I want to have tattooed on my body somewhere. That's how much I love it. So we've got Pride and Prejudice, the classic, Ella Enchanted, a modern day classic, and Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. And that is it for the AuthorTube and BookTube newbie tags. I hope you learned a little bit about me and will come with me on this journey to both write books and read them. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And as always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.